In today's video, I'm gonna share with you the top B2B marketing strategy that you need to start with your business today, especially if you're selling complex B2B products called create demand and capture demand. Why many businesses are not able to or afraid to use this strategy, and the results I got from implementing it. Let's take it to the next level. Hi everyone, I'm Carl. Welcome to Next Level Video Marketing, a channel where you get the latest strategies and tips to help you achieve your marketing and business goals through video. Now remember, if this is your first time on this channel and you want to get the latest strategies to help you maximize the impact of your marketing videos, hit the subscription button below, hit the little notification bell so you don't miss anything. So before we get into the details of the create demand and capture demand strategy, I want to provide a little bit of context, how I actually learned the strategy, who I learned this from, and why it works today. So I got my start in B2B back in 2010 in supply chain and logistics. Then I moved on to B2B SaaS. So between 2010 and 2016, I was heavily involved in B2B marketing. So I was heavy into the performance marketing side, which was the HubSpot playbook. Getting leads, nurturing them, turning them into MQLs, passing them on either to BDRs or sales teams, turning them into SQLs, and then from SQLs trying to book them, and then eventually getting to pipeline. So drank the HubSpot inbound Kool-Aid, did a lot of the certifications, did a lot of training myself, but then moved to B2C from 2017 to 2020 and moved back to B2B because I really missed the space. So when I came back, I really wanted to brush up my B2B marketing skills because I've been out of the space for a really long time. And I thought some of the methodologies, some of the marketing practices had changed. So connected with some of my old B2B colleagues, looked up a lot of the companies, started listening to a lot of blogs and podcasts and videos. And what I found was, even though it was 2020, it seemed that everyone was still using the old 2010 to 2016 playbook, the heavy performance driven marketing side that I was using, especially B2B SaaS companies. And that was strange because it was 2020 and people's behaviors had changed from back when I started B2B back in 2010. And we were also in the middle of a pandemic, or just starting the pandemic, where people's behaviors were being changed further. So I really wanted to learn what progressive B2B marketers were doing. That's where I started looking up people like Justin Welsh, Dave Gerhardt, Chris Walker, so many others, and that's just a small fraction of the people who are really pushing the B2B marketing space, really kicking down the traditional marketing practices and even the performance-driven marketing practices that I used back in 2010 to 2017. And we gotta remember that people have changed, how they access information has changed, what they can access has changed, and how they communicate with each other has changed, which has significantly impacted how they buy, both in B2B and in B2C. Specifically to B2B buyers, they have access to even more information. So places like Gartner, G2 Crowd, TrustRadius, Trustpilot, and so on. Places that didn't exist back then. And how they're communicating with each other has also changed, way beyond text, email, phone. Now they have WhatsApp, Slack, Microsoft Teams, Facebook Messenger, Instagram DMs, and so on. And direct-to-consumer and B2C companies are really changing customer expectations. A lot more self-service, more remote and virtual connections. And think about companies like Netflix, Hulu, Roku, where you have access to all the information and all that content all at once, all bingeable, to the point where there's too much content and you're really unsure what to actually consume. And that's exactly what the McKinsey report was referring to, that 70 to 80% of B2B decision makers prefer remote human connection or digital self-service because it's easier to schedule and it's obviously safer in the world that we're in today. Not to mention that the pandemic has really accelerated some of these expectations and behaviors, ones that I expect would have happened, but just really moved up their timeline. So what about lead nurturing? Don't we need to put people in our list to nurture them to eventually become our customers? It's one of the foundational principles of B2B marketing, isn't it? Well, I would argue with the changes in people's behaviors and their expectations and the changes of how people communicate and the access to even more technology and specifically communication technology, you don't necessarily need people in your list to nurture them. Especially for B2B buyers, there's places like LinkedIn, creating your own shows, which is the boom of podcasts and video shows. There's also events, virtual or in person, when it will eventually have them. And because there's so many places people are consuming content, we have to know and understand where our customers are consuming their content, who they're being influenced by, and making sure our content are on those channels and nurture them that way. And that leads me to the next piece, is the traditional marketing funnel, which I believe is heavily flawed because essentially we made it up, right? Here's an example of a traditional marketing funnel where we believe that the customer will enter from the top and go all the way to the bottom, and we'll be nurturing them through each stage. But in reality, customers and people are entering and exiting that funnel all over the place. And we actually don't know when they're entering and where they're exiting and how that actual buyer's journey is working for each person. And each person or business goes through that journey in different ways. And a little later on in this video, I'll actually show you a much easier approach to understand where people are and how to match your marketing accordingly. Finally, I want to talk about the importance of word of mouth, but instead of me talking, I want to actually play this little clip from Dave Gerhardt, who is the CMO of Privy, and he really sums up word of mouth in B2B marketing today.
Most B2B buying is done because of word of mouth. I talked to Chris, who's the VP of marketing at some company. That's my buddy. He says, don't use this product or don't use this guy's agency. They're trash. So I'm not going to. I'm going to do my own research. I'm going to read your blog. I'm going to listen to your podcast, but I'm going to also gut check it with somebody. Oh, or why does my competitor use that on their website? And I'm going to go check it out and get a demo. And so I think today, as a modern marketer today, I think the best way to increase intent is to position your brand as the expert for your topic. The way you increase intent is by being the media company that is creating content for that niche. And you have everything. You have the top of the funnel stuff, but you also have the how-to guides, like the examples, the tactical, the case studies. There isn't some magic technical change that you're going to make. It continues to be content. That is the hands down best channel in B2B from both a brand building and direct response marketing perspective.
Mm-hmm. B2B buyers are smart. If they are compelled and have a problem and they want to buy your software, they know where to go.
I've bought a lot of B2B, like 99% of the stuff that I've bought, I've either used it before, somebody I know that has told me about it, period.
So now that we have a little bit of context of where B2B marketing is at today, how people's behaviors and expectations have changed and how they communicate differently, let's get into creating demand and capture demand strategy. And I just want to point out that I learned this from Chris Walker. And if you go into the State of Demand Gen podcast, all those episodes, he really dives into this strategy. It's actually that podcast where I actually got a lot of these ideas and the concepts, and then I actually applied them to our business, and the results have been amazing. So I want to start with capturing demand first, where you see a lot of typical demand generation activities, where a lot of B2B marketing, especially in B2B SaaS, is focused in on. This is where you're capturing all those people and businesses who are actively looking for the solution or product that you're selling. This includes a lot of the obvious B2B marketing tactics like lead generation, SEO, paid search, conversion rate optimization, website optimization, review generation. As you can see, people are actually actively looking in all these channels for the product and solution or information about the product and solution that you're selling. There's a lot of B2B companies that have focused entirely or most of their marketing efforts in the capture demand area because it's easier to measure. You can create all those attribution models. You can create those influence percentages. It's where performance-driven marketing really shines. But if you think about it, there's only a small percentage, say about 5 to 7%, maybe 10% at the most, of businesses or brands who are actively looking to buy the product or service that you're selling. What about that 90 to 95% who are not buying? And it's funny how a lot of brands or businesses are fighting over that 5 to 7%, spending all that money on paid search, spending all that money on SEO, when there's still a lot of 90 to 95% that are just sitting there getting ready to buy. What about them? And this is where creating demand comes into play. And I would argue it's just as or even more important than capture demand. And it's essentially about communicating with your customers and creating the desire for them to want to use your product or service. So the activities associated with creating demand are things like building your brand, creating shows like podcasts or videos, those in-person or virtual events, your PR activities. So a lot of B2B companies don't leverage or use create demand because it's difficult to measure. How can you attribute the impact of a show, a podcast, or video series? How can you directly attribute to pipeline or leads a PR brand campaign? I've always had PR brand managers always ask me, hey, how can I, find attribution from what I do to that, affects pipeline or leads? And how can you attribute ungated content, right? It's easier to, how many emails did we collect from this gated piece rather than, oh, how many people read or consumed this ebook? And usually we don't know. We don't even know if people read ebook. So I just wanted to record the process of downloading an ebook or guide on LinkedIn. You can probably mimic the process on another social platform like Instagram or Facebook. So let's go find an ebook. Oh, here it is, Qualtrics. Let's download their ebook. Okay, it's a lead gen form, so it automatically puts in my number and email. Great, submit that. I'm gonna view it. Okay, here it is. One thing I don't like about ebooks, especially PDF ones, is that I have to pinch to zoom because it's really small and it's tough to read, especially with blocks of text like this. And what's worse is that this is on the LinkedIn browser. And so let's say I wanted to save it. So I could save it, but then that means I have to view it via LinkedIn. And if I wanted to save it on my phone, I could email it to myself, keep it on a reading list, but I wanted to put it in iBooks, can't really do that. So I'm gonna have to open it in another browser, which takes me off LinkedIn. Again, still pinch to zoom if I wanted to read it via my browser, which is not a good experience. So now I'm just gonna have to find iBooks. Here it is. And now I can read it. Again, still pinch to zoom on my phone. So not the greatest thing. But what's worse is I'm now removed from LinkedIn where I originally wanted to be. So now I'm gonna have to go back to LinkedIn and then here I am. But the thing is, the moment you save it, do you remember where you saved it? I'm gonna ask you, how many of you today have actually remembered to read ebooks that you've downloaded? But what's funny is a lot of brands, then the moment you download an ebook, you're fed into an email drip sequence. Most likely someone's gonna call you if you put your phone number. Yet all you wanted to do was consume a bit of content that you probably didn't even consume. So it's really crazy how a lot of brands are thinking, hey, you know what, if people download this ebook, they become leads and we're gonna nurture them through. But that's really not how people behave today. And the process itself is flawed. There's key elements of create demand. Remember, when you're creating content in the create demand phase, it's not to drive people to sales. It's really to help and educate them that leads to that awareness and consideration for your brand or business. You've created content with a sole purpose of helping and educating them that when they are ready to buy, they'll remember you. This is why I'm so passionate of ungating content. One, because how do we even know people will read this content? And two, if you're ungating it, you're providing more opportunities for your ICP or TAM to consume. Because the moment you put that barrier, a lot of people will like, you know what, I don't even have time or I don't want to put my information. Why not just give that away for free? So when they are ready to buy, they'll remember you rather than you missed a lot of those opportunities because you put the barrier and it was just too difficult to get your content. The focus of creating demand is to do it before people are intending to buy your product, before the funnel, and before they actually use Google. So there's 6 key elements to creating demand, and I've talked about these before, but I just want to recap. Are you creating demand and content that ensures that your customer actually knows about the problem or problems that your business is solving for? Does the customer know that your business actually solves that problem? Does the customer know about your products, your features, your unique value propositions, your perspectives on different issues? Because as we know, a lot of businesses and people want to do business with companies that align with their values as well. Number 4, can the customer see your product or service in real life situations? 5, are you able to reach your total addressable market or as much of your ICP as possible? And number 6, ties it all together. If you do number 1 and 5 effectively, then your brand or business will be top of mind when that business is ready to buy. And again, I found that the best converting prospects are the ones that have your brand or business top of mind. Then it's so much easier to convert your customers if they already have you top of mind when they're ready to buy. And finally, what brings us together, both create demand and capture demand, is intent. Intent of the prospects, intent of their activities, and intent of the channels and platforms that you want to put your marketing on. And you want to make sure your marketing aligns with intent. So what do I mean by this? Well, remember when I was talking about how the funnel was flawed, how we made up all these different sections or the buyer's journey, where people are? Well, I really took into account what Chris Walker mentioned about splitting that funnel from high intent and low intent. So when I talk about high intent, we're talking about declared intent, that the customer or prospect has declared that they're interested in your product or service. This includes demo requests, them calling sales, booking meetings, pricing requests, booking meetings through your chatbot. And when we talk about low intent, these are places where, they're not really ready to buy. They just want to consume information. Places like where they download your guide or ebook. They attended a webinar, listened or watched your show, attended a virtual or in-person event. It's really about understanding where people are, what their intent is, and the expectations associated with it. Now, we also have to consider intent when we're talking about channels and platforms. So places where there is significant buying intent would be paid search, SEO, review sites. Where there's consumption intent would be places like any social channels, places where they consume podcasts or videos, any of the communities they're in. And again, it's also about understanding the channel's intent from the perspective of the customer. And what we don't want to do is try to cross intent, especially buying intent, trying to apply buying intent in low intent and consumption intent channels. So things like gated content pieces that lead to sales-led motions in paid social, or trying to immediately call people who've attended your webinar. Remember, they want to get information, they want to be educated. They don't necessarily want to be sold to right away. Now, when we talk about results, the moment I implemented all these pieces, and it takes some time, right? It took several months for me to really implement a lot of these concepts into the business that I'm working with now. But when it did, the results have been outstanding. Our lead to SQO volume significantly increased. In fact, our last quarter was the highest quarter in terms of volumes of sales qualified leads, sales qualified opportunities, leads to SAL volume, lead to SQO volume. And I'm not going to say that just pure create demand and capture demand strategy led to that, but it played a significant part, because really the focus of the business was creating demand and optimizing all those channels. So how do we go about implementing this create and capture demand strategy? Well, the first thing we need to do, and it doesn't work if you don't do this, is number one, talk to your customers regularly. Make sure you schedule a call, maybe once a week, at the very least once a month. Try to do it twice a month, because then you can hear and understand all their, not just pain points, but what their perceptions were, how they found your product, what are some of the things they want now. A lot of the times when I'm listening to customers, they don't necessarily match, some of the things that we found when we created our persona, or they don't necessarily match the items that when we created that buyer's journey. That's why that high intent, low intent makes a lot of sense, because those customer values, those customer perceptions, and those customer wants and needs are always changing. What we want to do is close the gap between what our customers are perceiving or feel about our product and what our product or solution actually can do to help them. The second thing we want to do is create demand and awareness channels, where people go to consume content, not necessarily to buy. So these include places like paid and organic social, shows, events, your PR, brand campaigns, communities, word of mouth. And finally, we want to capture demand in buying intent channels. Again, like SEO, paid search, review generation, website optimization, conversion rate optimization. We want to make sure we're optimized when people are ready to buy, but make sure that we've created so much demand that we're top of mind when they are ready to buy. So if you want to learn more about other B2B marketing strategies, you got to check out this video here, as well as this video for other video marketing tips and strategies. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in our next episode.